Now that we're into the presidency of Joe Biden, what is the role of QAnon and the ideas upon which it is built?
There has been an awakening. Have you felt it?
Supporters of QAnon were out in full force at President.
It's called QAnon, a fringe conspiracy theory that some political analysts have likened to an online religion.
I know if you're a person who's into those theories, you'll say it's not a conspiracy because there's proof. Well, in this video, we'll look at what there is tangible proof for, some of which is pretty nefarious and troubling and shows where the concentration of power is, and what is speculative, or as it would be referred to by detractors of QAnon, baseless theories.
Followers believe that a cabal runs the United States. They control the media, Hollywood, and politicians, and the only person that can stop them is Donald Trump.
Some of the figures that the QAnon narrative features are like Hillary Clinton, she comes up a lot, Barack Obama, George Soros, Bill Gates, Tom Hanks, Oprah Winfrey, Chrissy Teigen, Pope Francis. So sort of powerful and prominent figures.
These people are taking an oath to QAnon.
Where we go one, we go on. Where we go one, we go on.
When you see that there, you see loads of people believe in QAnon theories. The same way loads of people will just say, what I see on the mainstream news, that's enough for me. You know, you vote for the Democrats or you vote for the Republicans. That's all there is. Well, that's not my position. I recognise that if you feel you have no agency, that it doesn't matter who you vote for, you'll get the same results, that there's nothing you can do politically that's going to mean that your personal life is going to change, that you're going to be able to do what you want with your family, feed your family better, spend more time with your family, live a better, more meaningful life. For me, that creates an environment where I do become cynical and suspicious.
Here's how many posts there were over the 2 years before the pandemic. And then in March, this happened. On Facebook, in just 4 months, membership of the biggest public QAnon groups rose by 700%.
One of the most famous conspiracies is that 9/11 was an inside job. That's a difficult subject to talk about. Once on a mainstream news show, I was asked about it, and I said something along the lines of, I don't trust the government, and that was used to preclude me from participating in political debate for a long time subsequently. Like respected thinkers like Noam Chomsky, who could hardly be called an establishment figure, has said there's absolutely no evidence at all that 9/11 was an inside job, right? That's Noam Chomsky. But John Pilger talked about how in the late 90s, 1999 specifically, there were discussions for which there is evidence that America needed to have a catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. This became known as the Project for the New American Century. Bob Woodward, of course famous for his work on exposing the Watergate scandal, reveals how the events of 9/11 were manipulated. On the morning of the 12th of September 2001, without any evidence of who the hijackers were, Donald Rumsfeld, a senior figure in the Bush administration, demanded the US attack Iraq. According to Woodward, Rumsfeld told a cabinet meeting that Iraq should be a principal target of the first round in the war against terrorism. Iraq was temporarily spared only because Colin Powell, the Secretary of State, persuaded Bush that public opinion has to be prepared before a move against Iraq is possible. So whilst there's no evidence that 9/11 was an inside job, some immovable, like ratified evidence, what we do know, what there's evidence of around 9/11 is, in response to 9/11, US government sanctioned the collection of telephone and internet records of tens and millions of Americans by the NSA as uncovered by Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden wasn't pardoned by Donald Trump. Edward Snowden wasn't pardoned by Barack Obama. So there you have like a significant piece of evidence upon which you can say, hey, I don't trust the government, and it doesn't matter whether the Democrats or the Republicans are in power. No one's doing anything about a genuine, legit hero like Snowden, who exposed information that the government was spying without permission on ordinary citizens. So for me, that's what interests me about anti-establishment thinking.
Some relatives find it especially hard to deal with a QAnon belief that the pandemic is a hoax.
Here's another idea that's very popular, and it falls under the QAnon banner, that Bill Gates created coronavirus in a secret lab and is making vaccines a requisite in order to implant microchips into people. Yuval Noah Harari says we should not dismiss conspiracy theories too easily. as they often represent deep and sometimes justified fears that humans have. One such theory, that the COVID-19 virus was created with the idea to implant people with computer chips to control them, is ridiculous, but represents a realistic fear of surveillance technology, which is one of the consequences of the pandemic. What we know is that the coronavirus pandemic has seen cooperation between governments and big tech to increase public surveillance, as well as speed up digital changes such as remote learning and e-health. In New York, former Google chief executive Eric Schmidt is leading a panel tasked with technologically transforming the city. Bill Gates has also been called in to help and create a smarter education system. Even Naomi Klein said in her recent article about Davos and the Great Reset that the amount of power and influence that Bill Gates has is troubling. There are many very well documented cases of Bill Gates' philanthropy. He's continually referred to in most media as a philanthropist, and the work of his foundation is continually lauded. But here are some other facts about Bill Gates' foundation that I'd never heard before. I don't know if you had. The Gates Foundation is the largest donor to the World Health Organization, which some researchers argue gives Gates a disproportionate influence on global health with little accountability, an unelected leader making decisions about public policy and public priorities without any public discussion or political process. Furthermore, Gates has made no mention of his foundation's investment in any pharmaceutical companies working on COVID. The foundation refused to provide details about its current investment portfolio, and when writing about what he thought government leaders should be doing to tackle COVID in the New England Journal of Medicine, he does not disclose the details of his financial ties. Gates filled out the journal's required conflict of interest form, but simply listed his conflicts as numerous, giving readers no sense of the size, scope or type of his financial stake in the pandemic. The Gates Foundation is littered with former employees from big pharmaceutical companies such as Merck, Novartis, Pfizer and GlaxoSmithKline. The Gates Foundation also invests in these corporations, directly holding stakes in drug companies including Merck, GSK, Eli Lilly, Pfizer, Novartis and Sanofi. Critics have said a key role that Gates has played in the pandemic has been elevating the pharmaceutical industry, for example pushing the University of Oxford to deliver its leading COVID-19 vaccine platform into the hands of Big Pharma. The resulting partnership with AstraZeneca had another effect, as Bloomberg reported, changing the university's distribution model from an open license platform designed to make its vaccine freely available for any manufacturer to an exclusive license controlled by AstraZeneca. Various pharmaceutical companies have been given legal indemnity by both the UK and US governments, guarding them against liability for side effects from coronavirus vaccines. Donald Trump boasted that his administration cut through every piece of red tape to achieve the fastest ever by far launch of a vaccine trial. I suppose the value of a list like that is to demonstrate that within the realm of public record there is sufficient financial activity to cause concern without recourse to ideas that are more difficult to prove and for which there is no evidence that I know of. The Gates Foundation has also influenced news coverage of global health policy, donating millions to major media outlets, including NPR, PBS, ABC, BBC, Al Jazeera, The Telegraph, The Financial Times, Univision, and The Guardian. So my position is I have a sense that there are deep state and corporate relationships that influence policy and impact in a significant way the lives of ordinary people. Certainly there is sufficient provable, demonstrable stuff to suggest there needs to be radical change in the way that we run the world, and I can understand why people would have doubts, suspicions, and why a territory for speculation would be created. But what has always interested me is the actual way that very powerful interests operate and collaborate. That, in a literal sense, is a form of conspiracy without recourse to these rather more esoteric and some would say peculiar assertions around occultism.
As America watched President Biden take the oath of office, QAnon followers were waiting for the Great Awakening. Many of them believe that the inauguration was a carefully planned setup where Democrats would be arrested and Donald Trump would start a second term in office.
I also have trouble believing that Donald Trump is in a kind of heroic role in this situation just because of some of the policies that were implemented during the 4 years that he was in government. Whilst Trump has often been critical of big tech during his presidency, Donald Trump's 1.5 trillion tax cuts helped billionaires pay a lower tax rate than the working class for the first time in history. The tax package meant the top 0.1% of US households were granted a 2.5% tax cut that pushed their rate below that of the lower 50% of US earners. So that's one of the things I'm curious about. I sometimes enjoyed Trump's rhetoric, his performance style, the way he attacked the establishment. But at heart, I don't think that Trump was a figure whose interests were, how can we help ordinary people have a better life?
This sounds so crazy, and I recognize how crazy this sounds, but I don't believe Joe Biden is going to be sworn in as president today.
In Under the Skin last week, we spoke to Jonathan Haidt. Human nature is 90% chimp and 10% bee. We are like chimps in being primates whose minds were shaped by the relentless competition of individuals with their neighbours, but we are like bees in being ultra-social creatures whose minds were shaped by the relentless competition of groups with other groups. We are descended from earlier humans whose groupish minds helped them cohere, cooperate and outcompete other groups. My hypothesis, says Jonathan Haidt, is that human beings are conditional hive creatures. We have the ability, under special conditions, to transcend self-interest and lose ourselves temporarily and ecstatically in something larger than ourselves. That's a really brilliant theory by him. And I suppose what I get from looking at this analysis is we are living in conditions now that are so detached from those for which we are evolved that we've become lost, that power has become too concentrated. Many of us are living lives detached from meaning. And in order to counteract these doubtless powerful forces, we need to hold those very powerful forces accountable and create alternative systems ourselves where we have real agency, real control over our own lives.
Do you feel like you've been duped, that you've been tricked?
I was just kind of in shock, and I thought I had to reevaluate everything, the way my life was going to be now, because it's so different than my expectations.
I suppose why I'm sympathetic to people that have anti-establishment ideas is because they chime with my own ideas about power, and also because I recognise at heart there is a real appetite for change, and that change is because there is a lot of suffering and a lot of people feeling real pain and isolation and alienation and an understandable dearth of hope, because politics, as we surely know by now, operates at the behest of powerful interests, and the alterations that take place at that level are not significant or meaningful for ordinary people, and this merely enhances that sense of desperation and loneliness. And I think in that space people are willing to believe in anything. So I understand this man's sense of loss and hopelessness and confusion.
I believe that this is a real thing. Reptilian aliens, people in our government who are working towards a deep state. What QAnon is just an amalgamation of all of the greatest conspiracy theories thrown into one big belief.
Let's get all them conspiracy theories together, throw into one big belief. I think it's more important to focus on what can be demonstrated and proven, and what are we going to do as an alternative. When I was much more famous, there were even videos about me saying, oh, he's a handler, he's Katy Perry's handler. And people all the time ask about this 33 tattoo. That's because I like the number and I like Jesus. And because I've been the subject of this kind of conspiratorial accusation, it means that I'm a little cautious around it. Also because I've been a public figure for a long time. I've been on the TV talking about being anti-establishment a long, long time ago, by the way. You know, so I'm cautious about the way I approach these conversations. Do you know why? Because I'm interested in change. I believe it's possible to organise society in a different way, but that will not be possible unless you hold powerful interests accountable. And unfortunately, in order to do that, you have to play by a certain set of rules. You have to demonstrate factually what can be proven. And let me tell you, there is no dearth of stuff that you can say is demonstrably happening. Wars gone to under false pretenses, heroes that exposed the irresponsibility, cruelty and dishonesty of the American government, cast out to live lives in exile. Not one, but two presidents not pardoning them. One of them Donald Trump, one of them Barack Obama. So whichever one of them you happen to think is a great hero, neither of them sought to pardon Edward Snowden, a man who, in my opinion, plainly exhibits the potentialities and attributes of a hero, i.e. willing to sacrifice himself for a better idea. And what is that idea? Ordinary people deserve to have agency over their own lives. Ordinary people deserve to be free. And if we're living in the shadow of the interests of unaccountable people, whether they're governmental or corporate or wealthy for whatever reason, then there is no freedom. Deep down, you're interested in freedom. You want to be able to live the life that you were born to live with the people that you love. Well, think about how is that solution going to be reached? By making powerful people accountable, by presenting alternatives. This, I truly believe, is possible, and that is not a conspiracy.